Caitlin Clark come out and say what needed to be said. She stood on business and said, we need to play in games. Kelsey Plum's response is in this. It's just crazy, man. Y'all are somewhat compromised on the situation to a degree, even if you're, it's just weird, man. It's a little weird. Y'all on the board, but y'all got equity in the competitor league, and y'all that are signed to these other leagues that are compromised, stop playing with the people who are not. Stop. Here it says, Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark said Friday that while WNBA players will fight for everything we deserve during their current round of collective bargaining.
That clip is making waves across WNBA circles right now, and for good reason. Because what we're witnessing is not just a disagreement about money. This is about something far more dangerous. Kelsey Plum, first vice president of the WNBA Players Association, is leading hardball negotiations while holding equity stakes in Unrivaled, a direct competitor to the WNBA. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark, the league's biggest star and the reason viewership exploded in 2024, is publicly calling for compromise to save the season. Two players, two completely opposite messages, and one of them has a financial interest in seeing the WNBA struggle. Let's be crystal clear about what's happening here. The people negotiating your next WNBA season have money invested in a league that directly competes with the WNBA. They're sitting at the bargaining table demanding everything while knowing they have a safety net if talks collapse. That's not just controversial. That's a conflict of interest so obvious, it's shocking more people aren't talking about it. If you believe the story behind the story matters, smash that like button. It tells us we're on the right track, because what you're about to hear goes deeper than any headline is willing to admit. This all came to a head on January 10th, 2025. Caitlin Clark was at Duke University for USA basketball camp when she made a statement that separated her from union leadership. She said players deserve to fight for everything they're owed, but she also made it clear that compromise has to happen on both sides. She pointed out that fans want to see the product on the floor. She stressed that time is running out, and she acknowledged that some things are worth fighting hard for while other things require flexibility. That might sound diplomatic, but in the context of where negotiations stand, it was a direct challenge to the hardball approach Kelsey Plum and others are taking. Hours later, Plum responded. She said the talks have been disheartening. She said both sides are still far apart. She made it clear the union is not backing down. And she did all of this while holding equity in Unrivaled, a league that would benefit massively if the WNBA season gets delayed or canceled. Many of you have been saying this for weeks. You've been pointing out that something doesn't add up. Why would negotiators push so hard they risk blowing up the season? Now we know. Because they have options. They have Unrivaled. They have overseas contracts. They have equity stakes that could pay off if WNBA momentum stalls. The rank-and-file players don't have those options. Those players are counting on a deal getting done. But the people representing them at the table are insulated from the consequences.
Plum's response is in this. It's just crazy, man. Like, you're signed to Unrivaled. You got equity in Unrivaled. Like, y'all are somewhat compromised on the situation to a degree, even if you're, it's just weird, man. It's a little weird. Y'all on the board, but y'all got equity in the competitor leagues. It's all a little conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. A second extension of the current CBA through January 9th, 2026, as both sides continue to work toward a new deal. But questions persist on whether both sides will come to an agreement by then, or even whether a work stoppage could be on the horizon. Now, this is what Kelsey Plum had to say. This is what Kelsey Plum had to say. Kelsey Plum, first vice president of the WNBPA, said at Camp Friday that the talks have been a little disheartening. Just the frustration.
Here's what makes this moment so critical. The WNBA just delivered its strongest year ever. Attendance at Indiana Fever games doubled. Viewership records were shattered. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Sponsors flooded in. That surge didn't happen by accident. It happened because of Caitlin Clark. Everyone knows it, even if some refuse to say it out loud. The league's recent growth is tied directly to what she brought in 2024. And now, as negotiations reach a breaking point, she's the one calling for compromise, while the negotiators with unrivaled equity are playing hardball. The deadline has already been extended twice. The original deadline was in December. That got pushed to January 9th, 2026. Now it's been extended again to January 19th. The WNBA and the Players Association keep buying more time. But according to Kelsey Plum, both sides are still nowhere close to an agreement. They've already burned through the first extension. They're halfway through the second one. And the language coming from union leadership is getting more concerning, not less. Let's talk about what's actually on the table. The league's latest proposal includes a maximum salary of $1 million guaranteed for 2026. When projected revenue sharing is added in our toss, top players could earn more than $1.2 million. The salary cap would jump to $5 million in 2026 and then rise each year based on revenue growth. Right now, the current max salary sits at around $242,000. This proposal would more than quadruple top player pay. That's not a small move. That's a massive shift. But the Players Association is pushing for more than just higher salaries. They want a full transformation of the salary structure, a redesigned revenue-sharing system, upgraded standards for team facilities and staffing, and expanded benefits. Those last demands appear to be where talks keep hitting a wall. The league is willing to offer million-dollar salaries, but that would mean cutting back on some housing stipends and vehicle allowances players currently receive. The union doesn't want to swap one benefit for another. They want everything to stay and more to be added. This is where Caitlin Clark's stance starts to separate from union leadership. She's not on the negotiating committee. Her Indiana Fever teammates Lexi Hall, Lexi Brown, and Aliyah Boston serve as the team's union representatives. Brianna Stewart holds the role of union treasurer. Clark relies on them for updates and insight, but she's not inside the room where final decisions are made. That distance gives her space to say things others can't say out loud without backlash. Because she's not tied to the negotiating table, Clark can speak more freely about balance. She's made it clear that some things are worth fighting hard for, and some things require strategic compromise. That's not backing down. That's understanding leverage and timing in a business moment that doesn't come around often. She acknowledged that players should push for what they deserve, while also recognizing that flexibility has to exist on both sides. That mindset shows long-term thinking. Here's the part that should worry everyone: demanding everything with zero movement risks ending up with nothing. And nothing leads to no season at all. No season means no games. No games leads to zero exposure. And that's where the real danger sits. A work stoppage could emerge if the owners opt to lock out the players or the players opt to strike. Clark understands this. She's calling it the biggest moment the WNBA has ever seen, making it all the more important that they find a way to play next season. You were onto something when you noticed the timing of all this. Drop a comment below with your take on whether negotiators with unrivaled equity should even be allowed at the bargaining table, because this conflict of interest issue isn't going away. And the WNBA needs to hear that fans are paying attention. Let's connect the dots on what's really happening here. The league just came off a historic year, driven almost entirely by Caitlin Clark's arrival. She brought 3.2 million viewers to WNBA broadcasts. She doubled attendance at Fever games. She brought sponsorship deals flooding in. And now, as the league tries to lock in a new collective bargaining agreement that could define the next decade, the people negotiating on behalf of players have financial stakes in a competing league. Think about that for a second. Kelsey Plum and others on the negotiating committee hold equity in Unrivaled. That means If WNBA negotiations collapse, if the season gets delayed, if fans start losing interest because there's no basketball to watch, Unrivaled benefits. Those players don't just have a backup plan. They have a financial incentive for the WNBA to stumble. That's not speculation. That's basic economics. See, Plum's response to this is crazy, Rusty, man. Like you're signed to Unrivaled. You got equity in Unrivaled. Y'all are somewhat compromised on the situation to a degree. It's just weird, man. It's a little weird. Y'all on the board, but y'all got equity in a competitor league. It's all a little conflict of interest. And that's exactly what makes Caitlin Clark's public stance so significant. She's not attacking the union. She's not siding with ownership. She's simply acknowledging reality. Playing games matters. Momentum matters. Timing matters. This isn't about loyalty or betrayal. It's about survival versus strategy. It's about whether pushing for everything right now is worth risking the very platform that finally made those demands possible. Clark's thinking is focused on getting the season played, proving that the recent growth is real and sustainable, and then entering the next CBA cycle with even more leverage. The idea is simple. Protect the momentum while it exists. Don't risk destroying something that's finally starting to work. Her concern isn't about giving up leverage forever. It's about timing and survival. But here's the problem. Clark isn't sitting inside the negotiating room. The people who are making the decisions operate under different incentives. Union leadership is choosing a hardball approach. They can afford to take that stance because they have safety nets. They have alternative leagues. They have equity stakes. They have overseas opportunities waiting if things fall apart. The majority of players don't have those options. Those rank-and-file players are hoping the hardball strategy pays off, even though they're the ones who will feel the damage first if it doesn't. Multiple sources are whispering about growing frustration among players who aren't on the negotiating committee, not officially confirmed. But the breadcrumbs lead to a divide forming inside the Players Association itself. The voices with the loudest microphones aren't always the ones carrying the most risk. The players with leverage are insulated. The players without leverage are hoping the gamble pays off. And Caitlin Clark stepping outside the approved message has cracked that reality wide open. So the real question becomes, who's right? In a perfect world, players would get everything they're asking for. They've been underpaid for decades, and the surge in attention has exposed just how far behind compensation has been. This moment absolutely should be used to correct that imbalance, but this isn't a perfect world. The WNBA is still not profitable. Owners have other places they can invest their money. Momentum can disappear faster than it arrives. Reading between the lines of what Clark said at Duke, she's trying to bring a dose of realism into this conversation. Her message is clear without being confrontational. Players deserve more money, better benefits, and long overdue respect. But there also has to be an honest assessment of what's achievable right now. Without games, everything else collapses. That's why strategic compromise may be the smarter move in the short term. Secure the season, keep fans engaged, maintain sponsor confidence, then push harder once the financial picture is stronger. The timeline matters. If a deal gets done by late January or early February, the hardball approach will be credited with success. If negotiations drag into March or April, and the season is delayed or canceled, Clark's warnings will look painfully accurate. Either way, this public divide between the league's biggest star and union leadership is something the WNBA has never seen before. It exposes a deeper tension that's been building beneath the surface. The Players Association is built on the assumption that future growth will continue and eventually cover costs. In other words, the league is betting forward on momentum that's still developing. The Players Association is taking a different stance. Their position is that profitability concerns aren't the players' problem. From their perspective, compensation should be based on the value players generate, not on whether the league has figured out its long-term business model yet. That argument makes sense on a philosophical level. Players are the product. Without them, there's no league, no broadcast, and no revenue. At the same time, it becomes a risky strategy in practice if demands rise so high that owners decide continued investment is no longer worth it. If that happens, teams could fold, budgets could shrink, and the entire system could break down. In that scenario, no one wins and no one gets paid. What happens next will be telling. If Caitlin Clark is willing to publicly step away from the union message, others may eventually do the same. If enough players begin questioning whether the hardline is worth the risk, the union's negotiating position weakens. That pressure may be exactly what Clark is trying to create. She's forcing a conversation about compromise before the point of no return, because once a work stoppage begins, the damage is immediate. Trust erodes, fans drift away, sponsors hesitate. The opportunity created in 2024 could vanish. That's what's truly at stake here. Not just salaries and benefits, but the future direction of the league itself, whether the WNBA builds on this moment or lets it slip away, whether players secure lasting financial security or settle for modest gains, and whether the league moves toward sustainability or remains dependent on outside support. Caitlin Clark understands that reality. The only remaining question is whether anyone else is willing to listen. This situation has revealed a power imbalance inside the Players Association itself. The negotiators with unrivaled equity are looking to capitalize off Caitlin Clark, because if there was no Caitlin Clark in this league, they would have already agreed on a deal. Trust and believe they wouldn't be doing all this hard negotiating if there was no Caitlin Clark that came in this league and brought the numbers, brought the viewership, brought everything. Simple as that. Clark chose honesty over silence. She said the quiet part out loud. And now everyone's watching to see if the union adjusts its strategy or doubles down on a hardball approach that could cost everyone the season they've been building toward. Once fans leave, they don't all come back. Once trust breaks, it's hard to rebuild. This is no longer just a labor story. It's a turning point. If you want to stay ahead of what happens next in this CBA showdown, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because when the next major development drops, when negotiations either collapse or come together, you'll hear it here first. We're tracking every leak, every statement, every move the WNBA and the Players Association make. Drop a comment with your prediction. Does the season start on time, or are we headed for a work stoppage? Let's talk about it. This story is far from over. And the most interesting part, it didn't come from a boardroom or a press release. It came from the league's biggest star choosing to speak truth when silence would have been easier. Stay locked in. The next chapter is coming.